Hi there, welcome back. I'm Jared.
I'm Brittany, and this is Honors Grad U.
Civil rights are a huge part of political discussions occurring today worldwide, and especially in the US. Some of you might be asking yourselves, when will this end? The short answer is probably never. Civil rights in the United States have been a topic of heavy debate and discussion since at least the mid-1800s, if not since any form of government ever began, and not likely to ever stop.
Let's travel back to the 1830s in the US. There was a guy named John Barron who owned a harbor in Baltimore, Maryland. The governor of said city decided to do some construction and in the process to decrease the value of Mr. Barron's once profitable property. What did Mr. Barron do to correct the situation? He sued the city of Baltimore, saying that under the Fifth Amendment, part of the Bill of Rights that specifies if the government takes your property, they have to compensate you, that he deserves some money.
Well, the Supreme Court ruled on Barron v. Baltimore that the U.S. Bill of Rights were only rules that the federal government had to follow, and that it couldn't be forced upon the individual states. What this meant for the slaves and African-American populations was that, well, people could still own them, as the Bill of Rights did not apply at the local level.
With the Civil War in the 1860s came Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, which was a nice gesture but difficult to enforce considering the states that still had slaves had declared themselves as not being under Lincoln's jurisdiction anymore. About 5 years later, the 14th Amendment was passed, which grants citizenship to all people born or naturalized in the United States, overturning the terribly sad Dred Scott case, which had previously said slaves could not be citizens. The 14th Amendment also forbid a state from denying any person their life, liberty, or property without the due process of law.
Skipping ahead to the 1870s, where the 15th Amendment to the Constitution was signed, giving African Americans their right to vote. The Civil Rights Act of 1875 declared that African Americans must have equal treatment, but the Supreme Court overturned the decision in the 1880s, saying that the government couldn't force private entities to keep from discrimination.
So, Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves, the 14th Amendment made African American citizens, and basically said at least part of the Bill of Rights did apply to them, and that the 15th Amendment said that they could vote. But they still weren't equal to whites by any means. They almost were, but then not.
Around this time, people had decided, well, we can't have them as slaves anymore, so what's the next best thing? They, in their ignorance, decided on segregation.
In 1896 was the court case Plessy v. Ferguson, which coined the well-known idea of separate but equal. This was part of the Jim Crow laws that focused on keeping segregation afloat, but basically only added that if the whites had a flush toilet, then the colored bathrooms also had to have flush toilets. Separate but equal.
It wasn't until almost 60 years later, in the 1954 case, Brown v. Board of Education, that separate but equal was overturned, saying no segregation in schools was allowed. Unfortunately, it took a really long time for the segregation in the South to go away, and nothing got done for a while.
In fact, Southerners resisted so much that President Eisenhower had to order troops to Arkansas to protect some children just trying to go to school. Violence against African Americans rose tremendously, and people did lots of bad things. 1957 brought the only other Civil Rights Act to pass since the failed attempt in the 1800s that basically said, yes, African Americans can vote, and no, you can't try to persuade them or coerce them into not voting.
The Civil Rights Act of 1964 that made segregation illegal in all public places, not just schools, and 1968 saying everyone had equal housing opportunities, as well as the Voting Rights Act of 1965 finally had enough consequences and clearly defined penalties for those that discriminated that desegregation ended shortly thereafter. Good job, guys! Only took about 100 years since the slaves were freed.
Of course, these are just the legal steps that led to civil rights for African Americans. It's difficult to mention the movement without the heart and soul responsible for changing public opinion, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Unfortunately, discrimination was and is still a problem with issues involving many different groups of people.
The best thing to do in any situation is to try and make the world a better place by loving everyone and doing your part to share that love. Aww. If you like this video, share the love with us by clicking the like button and sending this to your friends.
Leave a comment and tell us if you've had an experience with discrimination and how you overcame it. Click this annotation for more education. I'm Brittany.
I'm Jared, and this is Honors Grad U.